Scream whir! That's what one of them said as he grabbed her by the hips. The second was already unbuckling his belt. The third, he started recording. And the fourth, he locked the door behind them. They didn't know who she was. They didn't care. She was alone, wet, Gennard. They were going to rup her until 60 seconds later. One was bleeding, one was crying, one was unconscious, and one running for his life. Because the woman they just tried to violate was a Navy SEAL. And by the time the MPs showed up, she was dressed, calm, holding the evidence while they begged for someone to listen. Before we show you how it all collapsed around them, hit subscribe, and drop a comment with where you're watching from, because this wasn't just a takedown, it was an audit. Commander Riley Keene stepped off the transport van with one duffel bag and no entourage, the kind of arrival that didn't draw eyes unless you were trained to notice the people who tried not to be noticed. The Joint Training Annex sat on the far edge of the base like an afterthought. Concrete buildings, faded signage, floodlights that made everything look colder than it was. The place ran on routine, rank, and repetition. And underneath it, if the reports were accurate, it ran on something else too. The duty officer met her at the gate with a clipboard and a smile that was a little too eager. "Ma'am, Commander Keene, welcome aboard. We've got your quarters ready and the colonel's expecting you at 0700 for a sit-down." Riley nodded once, polite but unreadable. "I'll be there." The officer glanced at her rank patch and then quickly looked away, like he didn't want to stare too long. Most people did that when they weren't sure what kind of officer they were dealing with. Riley wasn't flashy. She didn't carry herself like someone waiting to be saluted. She carried herself like someone who didn't need the reminder. The official orders in her pocket said temporary oversight, inter-service combat readiness and integration, the kind of assignment that sounded boring enough to be safe, wrapped in enough bureaucratic language to make junior staff stop asking questions. On paper, she was here to observe training standards, provide recommendations, and ensure joint protocols were being followed. That wasn't why she'd been sent. The second set of orders, the ones she didn't show to gate guards, were sealed in a folder in her duffel, thick stock paper stamped with markings that made base commanders suddenly find urgent reasons to step out of their own offices. Those orders didn't mention training. They mentioned command climate. They mentioned patterns. They mentioned unreported incidents and informal transfers and the kind of quiet exits that left no paperwork behind. Someone had been pushing women out without ever technically pushing them. Riley had seen it before. Different bases, different uniforms, same blueprint. Predators didn't need permission. They just needed a system that looked away. As she followed the duty officer down the corridor toward admin intake, Riley's eyes moved without her meaning them to. Exit signs, camera angles, blind corners. The distance between doors, the rhythm of footsteps behind her. She counted them like breath. 1, 2, 3, until she knew exactly who was walking where and whether they were alone. "Long trip?" the officer tried. "Long enough," Riley said. He laughed like it was a joke. "Well, at least it's quiet out here." Riley didn't answer. Quiet was never a guarantee. Quiet was usually a warning. Her temporary office was already prepared. Basic desk, issued laptop, a keycard with access levels higher than most captains on the annex had ever held. Someone had even left a coffee pod box as a welcome gesture, like caffeine could make this mission normal. Riley set her duffel down and unzipped it. The sealed folder sat on top, exactly where she'd placed it. She peeled the tape back with slow precision and opened it. Inside was a single page on top. Crisp and final. Eyes only. Authority. Immediate action authorized in event of climate incident. No prior notification required. Riley read it once, then she read it again, because she never trusted anything that seemed too clean. She closed the folder, slid it back into the duffel, and locked it. Outside her window, she could see trainees moving across the yard, laughing, shoving, carrying gear, acting like the world was simple. Most of them were good. Most of them were here to work. But Riley didn't get sent across the country for most. She'd been sent for the ones who thought they could do whatever they wanted when the lights were low and the cameras were down for maintenance. And they still didn't know she was here. The recovery wing of the training complex sat tucked behind the main barracks, half renovated and poorly lit. its layout a mix of old tile and new drywall, like the base couldn't decide whether to tear it down or pretend it was fine. The corridor leading in still had a brass nameplate on the door from 3 commanders ago. No one used that door unless they had to. No one lingered without a reason. Riley Keene didn't like lingering. She preferred to move, check her surroundings, then disappear. That night, like every other night since arrival, she chose the recovery wing intentionally. It was after hours. No training classes, no drills, no athletic therapy appointments. Quiet. Empty. Mostly. The place was a leftover from a previous era, built during a funding spike that never lasted long enough to finish the upgrades. Inside, the facility was split into functional segments: a cold plunge tank room, steam pod chamber, old physical therapy racks, and a line of gender-neutral locker corridors that barely passed modern standards. The walls were painted a dull beige, mirrors were cracked in the corners, one overhead light in the plunge room flickered, not constantly, but enough to irritate. On paper, the facility had cameras. In practice, they were either awaiting parts, under evaluation, or conveniently angled away from where things tended to happen. Riley walked the corridor with her towel draped over one arm, gym bag in the other. She wasn't here for a workout. She was here to observe. This place had come up in the sealed folder under 3 vague bullet points: unsupervised hours, multiple non-punitive transfers, post-shift incidents requiring counseling. Nothing criminal, nothing loud, just patterns. She slowed as she passed the lockers. There was a faint scuff mark at the base of one wall. Looked like someone's heel had caught against tile, maybe in a struggle. Too faint to be conclusive, but it wasn't the only thing. She saw a cubicle door near the end of the row. Its lock clearly broken, the bolt jammed open. She knelt to look at it. Tool marks, forced open, not recent. A paper sign had been taped above the entry to the steam chamber. Out of order. Do not use. Maintenance scheduled. Except the paper was fresh, crisp, edges not even curled. That sign hadn't been weathered by weeks of humidity. It had been printed today. And on the wooden bench by the gear hooks, someone had carved a line with a key or knife. The message was crude, not obscene, but bitter. She shouldn't have cried if she didn't want attention. It wasn't graffiti. It was a warning someone had left behind, disguised as a taunt. Riley stood still for a long moment. There were places on every base like this. Not cursed, not evil, just ignored long enough that predators made their own rules there. No cameras, no chain of custody, just enough deniability to outlast complaints. She set her bag down on the bench, the towel folded precisely, her boots lined square with the edge. Everything she did was deliberate, not for ritual, but readiness. The air in the corridor felt clean, but it was wrong, too sterile, like the place had been scrubbed by someone who wasn't cleaning, but erasing. She tilted her head and listened. Distant footfalls, too faint to track, the kind that came and went just beyond corners, and then nothing. Riley exhaled once and moved into the cold plunge room, letting the door swing behind her. Not shut fully, just enough. She wouldn't stay long, just long enough to be seen, just long enough for whoever had been watching to think tonight was routine, because she was going to let the trap set itself. They called themselves the Noon Crew, though nobody outside their circle said it with affection. The name came from their habit of working out at midday when most others were still recovering from morning drills or prepping for afternoon rotations. It wasn't tradition, it was timing. That hour gave them the run of the recovery wing, the auxiliary gym, and the locker corridors without interference. There were 4 of them, though only 3 were always visible. Corporal Ellis Bray was the unofficial leader. He was tall, clean-cut, and carried himself with the same easy arrogance as a recruiter's pamphlet. Bray could charm his way into an argument and then out of consequences. His evaluations always read well. His instructors always used the word potential, but his peers, they used quieter words: prick, pressure, watch yourself. Private First Class Tanner Ruiz was his shadow. Thicker build, boxer's frame, fast to laugh at Bray's jokes, and faster to jump when given the nod. Ruiz was the kind who never needed to be in charge because he'd long ago decided it was easier to stand behind someone and push. Specialist Max Dorr was different. Nervous energy. always checking corners, the kind of guy who laughed a little too hard, a little too late. He wasn't committed like the others, but he followed anyway. The kind who'd call something a joke even when no one else was laughing. And then there was Staff Sergeant Jerome Mays, who didn't always appear with them, but always knew where they were. Mays had seniority, access, authority. He didn't get his hands dirty, but people listened when he said, "Boys will be boys," or "If there's no report, there's no incident." He was the cleanup man, the eraser. Earlier that day, they'd been posted near the motor pool where new female recruits were assigned for vehicle maintenance instruction. Riley passed by while shadowing a logistics review, and even in uniform, with no rank showing, she saw it happen. Bray leaned against a tool chest, voice low but sharp. "Hey, Private, how about you clean this wrench like you clean your—" He didn't finish, not because of guilt, but because another NCO walked past. The girl didn't say anything. She just clenched the wrench tighter and moved 2 steps away. Enough to understand her place. Enough to not make it worse. Riley watched without blinking. She didn't stop it. She didn't insert herself. She just added Bray's name to the mental ledger she'd been building since day one. Later, in the chow line, Ruiz made a crude comment under his breath to a female courtman reaching for utensils. She stiffened, but said nothing. Riley was seated 3 rows away, sipping coffee. Bray elbowed Ruiz and chuckled like it was harmless. Dor laughed too, but he looked over his shoulder when he did it, nervous, checking for witnesses. There were none, not official ones anyway. That's how it always worked. The jokes, the crowding in locker rooms, the recordings that never made it to the chain of command. Nothing explosive, just enough to unsettle, just enough to teach the women that if something did happen, they'd already be alone. Riley didn't need a camera. She could read patterns. They weren't the first group of their kind she'd audited, but they might be the first stupid enough to touch someone like her. Riley kept her movements ordinary on purpose. That was the trick to operating inside someone else's routine. You didn't announce yourself as a problem. You didn't make the building tense by being the person everyone suddenly had to behave around. You let people show you who they were when they thought no one important was watching. The recovery wing was almost empty that night, the way it always got after lights out. A couple of distant voices echoed somewhere near the auxiliary gym and then faded. The building settled into its usual silence, air vents humming, tile cooling under fluorescent light, the faint chemical smell of disinfectant that never quite covered the older scent underneath. Riley moved down the locker corridor with her bag in hand, towel folded over her forearm. She wasn't here to work out. She was here to confirm something she'd been suspecting since she saw that carved message on the bench. She passed the broken lock again, stopped, looked at it the way you looked at a door that had once been forced and never properly repaired. The bolt still sat wrong. The metal plate around it was warped. Someone had filed a maintenance ticket at some point. Someone had closed it without fixing it. That mattered. Riley turned into the changing corridor, the one with the narrow cubicles and the old benches. She kept her posture loose, casual enough that if anyone walked in and saw her, she looked like any other officer grabbing a late shower or rinse. Nothing that screamed authority, nothing that made predators reconsider. She set her bag down, folded her towel the same way she always did. Not perfect, not obsessive, just ready. She took off her top and hung it neatly, then reached for her toiletries. Slow, controlled, like she had all the time in the world. And that's when she heard it. The door at the far end of the hallway opened. Not the soft, respectful creak of someone stepping in with caution. A hard swing, purposeful, boots on tile, 4 sets. They weren't trying to be quiet. They didn't need to be. The recovery wing belonged to whoever decided it did. Riley didn't turn immediately. She didn't rush. She didn't grab for her clothes. She just listened and tracked them by sound, spacing, weight, rhythm. 1 stayed near the door, 2 moved forward, 1 veered left toward the lockers, blocking. "Look what we got," Bray's voice said, casual, amused, like he'd discovered a stray dog in the wrong yard. Riley turned then, slowly, her expression neutral, her hair still damp from earlier, her eyes steady. Bray stood in front, hands in his pockets like he was strolling through a shopping mall. Ruiz was beside him, shoulders rolled forward, hungry energy in his stance. Dor lingered behind them, half grinning, half glancing back toward the door, like he was already thinking about deniability. The 4th was a new face, another trainee, younger, planted near the entrance like security. Bray's eyes dropped, then came back up. His smile widened. "Oh," he said softly, like he was pleased. You're alone. Ruiz snorted and stepped closer. What I tell you, after hours is when they forget they're on base. Riley didn't move. She didn't cover herself. She didn't shrink. She let them see exactly what they wanted to see. A woman outnumbered in a quiet building. And she watched them mistake her stillness for fear. Bray tilted his head, pretending to be friendly. You knew? Haven't seen you around. Riley's voice was level. I'm not lost. Ruiz laughed, loud enough to bounce off the tile. She's not lost, she says. Bray took another step, closing the space like it was his right. This wing's basically ours at night, he said. No one comes in here unless we say so. You get that? The fourth guy by the door chuckled, and Door's grin tightened like he wasn't sure if he should be enjoying it. Riley's eyes flicked once, toward the door, the exits, the spacing. She already had their positions mapped. She could take them in under 10 seconds if she needed to. But she didn't. Not yet. Bray's smile turned sharper. You know, if you scream in here, no one hears it. Walls are thick. Pipes are loud. We tested it. Ruiz leaned in, voice low and filthy. Scream, worry. The words landed like a slap, meant to provoke, meant to humiliate, meant to shake her into reaction. Riley didn't flinch. She held Ruiz's gaze the way you held a target through a scope, calm, unblinking, already deciding. Bray's hand came up, and in it was a phone. The camera light blinked on, harsh and white. He angled it toward her like a weapon. Smile, he said. Let's make sure the boys see what happens when you wander into our space. Door laughed, but it sounded strained. Yo, Bray, maybe. Bray didn't even look at him. Shut up. Riley watched the phone, the reflection of the light in the mirror behind them, the way Ruiz's fingers twitched like he was ready to grab, the way the fourth guy shifted at the door, bracing like he was prepared to stop anyone from leaving. She could feel the shape of their plan now. It wasn't random. It was rehearsed. Her voice cut through the corridor, quiet and final. Turn it off. Bray blinked, like he wasn't used to being spoken to that way. Then he smiled wider. Or what? Riley didn't raise her voice, didn't threaten, didn't posture. She just said the truth. Or you're gonna spend the rest of your life explaining this moment. Ruiz scoffed. Who the hell you think you are? Bray stepped closer again, the phone still up, the camera still running. I think she's about to learn what happens when you don't respect the chain of command. Riley's eyes stayed locked on his. Then learn this, she said, and Ruiz reached for her. Ruiz didn't hesitate. His hand came forward, with practiced confidence, fingers closing around Riley's bare shoulder like he'd done it a dozen times before. That was his mistake. The moment skin contact was made, Riley's brain flipped from passive surveillance to direct engagement. She didn't react emotionally. She reacted procedurally, the same way she had clearing compounds in northern Syria, the same way she had neutralized armed insurgents in basements with no backup. Her left hand snapped up, not to slap, not to push, but to lock. She caught his wrist with surgical precision, fingers digging into the joint at the base of his thumb. Ruiz didn't register what was happening until her right elbow slammed into the side of his neck with a short, brutal arc. The strike landed just above the clavicle, targeting the brachial plexus, where nerves cluster like a switchboard. His body seized, knees wobbling. Before he could fall, she twisted the trapped arm, pulled him off balance, and drove his chest into the side of the bench. Not once, twice! He slumped on impact, gasping, the wind knocked out of him. Bray jerked backward instinctively, the phone in his hand tilting. The live recording continued, capturing Ruiz's body crumpled on the tile, Riley standing over him, barefoot, steady, eyes locked on the next threat. Door froze. Not a word, not a sound. He had no idea what to do. Fight? Run? Speak? Riley didn't give him time to choose. You, she said, locking eyes with him. Step back. Hands where I can see them. Door obeyed before he processed the command. His mouth opened, but no words came. Bray was already recovering. Rage twisted across his face, ego bleeding into panic. He lunged toward her, not with skill, but instinct. The kind of charge a man makes when he still thinks strength equals dominance. Riley slipped sideways. His shoulder passed within an inch of her chest, and she grabbed the back of his collar as he stumbled. Her right knee rose into his lower abdomen, cutting through his momentum. His phone dropped with a clatter. The screen stayed lit, still recording. Bray doubled over, coughing, gasping for air that wouldn't come. She didn't follow up. She didn't need to. The sound of two men crashing in under 10 seconds had rewritten the whole room. The fourth man at the door, young, barely shaving, stood frozen. He'd never expected it to go like this. No one had. Riley turned her head slowly toward him, calm, precise, no yelling. "Step away from the door!" He backed up automatically, fingers raised. Don't care." She looked at the floor, Ruiz wheezing. Bray still bent over, face pale and slick with sweat. Door frozen like a deer in floodlights. The air thick with chemical soap and the sharp metallic hint of blood where Ruiz's mouth had split on the bench edge. None of them moved. "You think I was here by accident?" she asked, voice still level. They didn't answer. They couldn't. She walked to the phone on the floor, picked it up, checked the screen, red dot still blinking. She tapped once to save the file. Ruiz moaned behind her. Bray coughed again. Door looked like he might vomit. They thought they were filming a trophy. They'd just documented a crime, and Riley had just collected her first piece of evidence. Bray finally stood upright, but the swagger was gone. His jaw clenched, eyes watering, one hand on his stomach. He looked smaller now, not just because he was in pain, but because the illusion had cracked. Ruiz hadn't moved since slamming into the bench, still groaning, still trying to breathe. The fourth man, young, dumb, terrified, remained posted at the door like a placeholder in someone else's crime scene. Only Door still stood in her range, halfway between fight and flight. Sweat gathered at his brow. His fists curled, but not with conviction. Riley took one step forward. "Try it," she said softly. That broke him. He bolted, past her, toward the exit, pure panic in motion, but he wasn't fast enough. She shifted sideways, caught his wrist mid-run, used his momentum to spin him into the wall. Not hard, not damaging, just controlled. Just enough force to flatten his instincts and leave him stuck. "Hands visible," she ordered. Door obeyed instantly, palms against the wall. His chest heaved, his breath stuttering. Bray found his voice then. "You're dead," he growled. "You think this is going to end well for you?" She turned. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Bray barked, louder now, trying to summon the bluster he'd lost. "You just assaulted Marines. I'll bury you with the chain of command." "You don't have a chain," Riley interrupted, calm as steel. "You have a leash," Bray froze. "I read your service record 2 days ago," she continued, stepping closer. 3 transfer requests from female subordinates, 2 command complaints marked informal, and 1 incident redacted so thoroughly the only thing left is a date and a file size. He blinked, swallowed. "I was sent to evaluate this base's culture," Riley said. "But you just gave me something better than an assessment." She turned to Door. "Back away, slowly." He did, inch by inch. His legs were trembling. She looked at the fourth man, still near the door. "You. What's your name?" He stammered. What? "Name. Rank. Now." Private Mitchell, ma'am." "Mitchell," she repeated. "You're going to walk out of this room. You're going to contact the duty officer and tell him there's a climate incident in the recovery wing requiring immediate security presence and chain of command notification." He stared at her, eyes wide. "What do I say happened?" She stepped past him without answering, calm, controlled. "Tell them," she said, "that 3 men just learned what happens when they mistake an operator for a victim." Then she crouched and picked up Bray's phone again, still recording, still documenting every second, every threat, every word. Bray slumped against the lockers now. Ruiz groaned from the floor, one arm cradling his ribs. Door sat on the bench, eyes glazed, spine straight like someone awaiting sentencing. They'd tried to corner her. Now they were sitting in their own trap, gift-wrapped, documented, preserved in crystal clear 1080p. And the only one not shaking was her. The first thing they heard was the sound of boots slamming against tile. The echo was sharp, heavy, fast-moving. Then the hallway door swung open with a metallic clang, and in stepped the duty NCO, followed by 2 base security personnel, both armed but not yet drawn. Private Mitchell had done what he was told. Riley didn't flinch. She stood exactly where she had been, calm, collected, and very deliberately not touching any of the men who now lay slumped or shaken around her. Bray was against the lockers, chest rising too fast. Ruiz sat against the bench, one arm limp. Door looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. The duty NCO took in the scene and hesitated. He was in his 40s, experienced, but not seasoned for this. Two men down, one woman standing, no raised voices, no visible weapons, but the tension hit him like heat from an open engine. "Everyone stand down," he ordered. "No one move." Bray sprang to life. "She attacked us," he said, too fast, too loud. "We came in, and she jumped Ruiz, slammed him into the bench. Jesus, look at him!" Ruiz groaned like the cue was rehearsed. Bray pointed. "She's not even assigned here. She's a contractor or something. She assaulted Marines in a government facility. We need to detain her, now." The security officer on the left began stepping forward, hand near his belt, radio already in his other. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "I'm going to need you to back up and—" "Don't finish that sentence, Riley said. Her voice wasn't raised, but it cut through the room like a switch. The officer froze mid-step. Riley reached into her folded clothing stack and pulled out the small black wallet with her ID. No hesitation, no fear, just procedure. She held it open. Commander Riley Keene, United States Navy, Special Operations Oversight, clearance level Tango 5, orders sealed, countersigned by Naval Group Command, on temporary active inspection under OSD Climate Review Directive. The NCO stepped forward and took the ID from her hand. He opened it, then opened it again, then looked at the small gold foil seal embedded behind the clearance line. His face changed, slowly, like a man watching his entire shift rewrite itself in real time. "Shit," he muttered under his breath. Bray started again, louder. "She's lying. She's not lying," the NCO said, now much more slowly. He looked back at the officers. "Weapons stay down. All of you, step back." The security detail stiffened. The tension shifted again, only this time, away from her. Riley turned the phone screen toward them and tapped play. The recording Bray had started showed exactly what he hadn't expected it to show. 4 men entering, blocking doors, using slurs, making threats, Ruiz reaching, her warning, his hand on her, then the takedown. The air was still. "No editing," she said. "Timestamp intact. Battery continuous." Bray opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The NCO handed her ID back carefully, then turned toward the others. His tone dropped a full octave. "Corporal Ellis Bray, Specialist Door, Private Ruiz," he said. "As of now, you are under detainment for attempted assault on a superior officer, unauthorized surveillance, and conduct unbecoming of a United States Marine. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not move without instruction." Ruiz started to argue, but his voice cracked into a cough. Door just slumped deeper. Riley stepped forward and looked at the NCO. "There's a sealed folder in my office, she said. "It contains full operational context for my assignment here. Retrieve it. Bring it to the base commander. Mark it urgent." "Yes, ma'am." She glanced around the room once more. The door guard, Mitchell, had vanished down the hall, probably out of fear. She didn't blame him. She'd seen entire chains of command collapse faster than this once the wrong name showed up on an ID card. Bray finally spoke again, weak now. "You set us up." Riley looked at him, calm, detached. "No," she said. "You exposed yourselves. I just pressed record." The silence in the recovery wing had shifted. It wasn't tension anymore. It was realization. Cold. Absolute. The kind that draped itself across every man still standing, every breath not yet spoken. Riley Keene didn't raise her voice, didn't declare anything beyond what was necessary. The moment had already declared itself. The senior enlisted, Master Sergeant Grayson, arrived 3 minutes after the detainment order was given. He was broad-shouldered, gray around the temples, and carried the fatigue of 20 years in. But the second he walked into that room, he stopped like he'd walked into a memory. He scanned the scene. 1 woman, upright. 3 men either seated, sprawled, or gasping. A phone recording on a loop. His eyes narrowed. "Report," he said. The duty NCO stepped forward. "Assault attempt, sir. On Commander Keene. All 3 detained. Footage recovered. Command clearance confirmed." Grayson's eyes went to Riley. His voice dropped slightly. "Commander? Keene?" She nodded once, then handed him her ID wallet. No dramatics. Just protocol. He opened it, then stopped. The silence stretched. Not because he didn't understand. Because he did. A little too well. Grayson turned the ID over, checking the embedded code. The clearance level stamped across the second page wasn't just unusual. It was dangerous. The kind of clearance that didn't belong on temporary assignments. "Who sent you?" he asked quietly. Riley replied without blinking. "OSD Directives Division. Inspection mandate under Title IX Sub-Authority. My orders are sealed in the folder that's now with the base commander." Grayson's mouth moved once. No sound came out. Then he nodded, once, slowly, and returned the ID with both hands. "Ma'am." She accepted it. Behind him, the security officers had gone still. One of them, the younger one, realized he'd almost drawn on a SEAL-level officer operating with climate oversight authority. His hand twitched once near his belt before going dead still. Riley turned toward the detainees. "Charges are as follows," she said, matter of fact. "Attempted assault of a superior officer, unlawful recording of a service member in a state of undress, threatening behavior in a federal facility, conspiracy to commit assault, misuse of a restricted training facility after hours." Bray opened his mouth, but she didn't give him space to speak. "The recording is time-stamped. The building's security log shows your entry. Witness statement confirms coordination. Your own phone contains the video. No one's arguing anymore." Ruiz leaned his head back against the bench, eyes closed. Dorr looked ready to cry. "To prevent contamination of evidence," Riley continued, "these three are to be held in administrative isolation pending command review. Their personal electronics, lockers, and messages are to be sealed and reviewed by forensic systems within 24 hours. Grayson nodded. "I'll authorize it. Chain of command notification. Already done. Colonel knows you're on base. He just didn't know why." "He will." She looked at Dorr. "Do you know what happens when investigations start with sealed orders and end with digital proof?" He didn't answer. "They don't get buried. They get audited." She stepped back toward the center of the room. Not pacing, not posturing, just completing the checklist in her head. The same checklist she'd used in Fallujah to clear a weapons cache site. The same one she'd used in Niger to identify a corrupt forward commander who thought silence meant safety. She didn't look like retribution. She looked like paperwork had finally become a weapon, and now the system couldn't pretend it hadn't seen what just happened. It didn't take long. By the time Grayson and the security detail escorted Bray, Ruiz, and Dorr to the holding wing, flanked, cuffed, and silent, the whispers had already started. Not in the loud, viral way that rumors usually spread, not in the barracks or the mess, but in the quieter spaces. The shared quarters where junior female enlisted members passed the news in glances. The empty stairwells where one woman said to another, "It happened, didn't it? Finally!" The comm shack where a night shift corporal paused on her break to quietly text someone in legal. By 0300, 4 female Marines in separate units had already submitted informal statements to the newly opened anonymous intake inbox. By 0400, one of them forwarded a file marked unusable video evidence, a file she'd previously deleted but had managed to recover. It was timestamped 5 weeks prior. It showed the same hallway, the same wing, different woman, different faces, but the posture, the fear, identical. Riley didn't sleep that night. She didn't need to. Instead, she returned to her office and pulled the original sealed folder from her bag. She opened her laptop and began uploading secured copies of the phone video, her own incident report, and her first formal directive. Activate Climate Assessment Protocol Alpha. Immediate review of unit culture and command complicity. By 0600, the stack of documentation was already forming. She had pulled the base-wide report logs going back 2 years, flagged every informal complaint involving Bray, Ruiz, or any adjacent names. Then she started cross-referencing with transfer requests, disciplinary waivers, and non-punitive discharges. The patterns weren't vague anymore. They were clear. Staggeringly so. 6 female Marines had been rotated out within 6 months of reporting hostile training environments. 3 had requested transfers citing mental health after being assigned to Bray's squad rotation. 1, Private Salazar, had disappeared from all active personnel records after a supposed reassignment to Quantico, an assignment Riley couldn't confirm through the official channels. This wasn't behavior, this was process. Predators had been protected, not directly, not with orders, but with silence, with plausible deniability, with systems built to delay, defer, and diffuse responsibility until nothing remained but the paperwork that didn't get filed. At 0700, as the sun cracked above the perimeter fence, Riley stood outside the base commander's office with a file under her arm that had grown from 1 page to nearly 2 inches thick. She didn't knock. Inside, Colonel Keating looked up like a man bracing for a phone call that never came. Instead, she handed him the file. "These are your people," she said flatly. "And this is what they've done." He opened the folder, stared at the names, the timestamps, the footage stills. Then the color left his face. "This isn't official yet," he said weakly. "It will be," Riley replied. The walls of the room seemed to close in slightly. Outside, in the barracks, the story had already changed. It wasn't about her. It was about what happened, and how finally someone had stopped it. No mess hall announcements, no speeches. But the women on base walked differently that morning. Straighter, quieter, like they were waiting to see if the correction would last, or if it was just one woman's stand against a culture too used to protecting its own. Riley wasn't interested in symbols. She was interested in systems. And this one, it was about to change. Colonel Keating had aged 5 years in the span of one meeting. The file Riley placed on his desk didn't scream. It didn't threaten. It simply documented. With timestamps, evidence chains, and cross-reference complaints, the rot that had been allowed to spread under his command. And that was the problem. There hadn't been a cover-up in the traditional sense. No shredded documents, no bribes, no orders barked into unsecured phones. Just neglect and the quiet willingness to believe things were being handled at lower levels. A shrug from legal. A talking to from a department head. A transfer form signed without comment. But now it was all in front of him, tied together by names, dates, and proof. Riley stood across from him, spine straight, no anger on her face, just clarity. "This wasn't an isolated incident," she said. "This was a pattern, enabled by a lack of accountability and tolerated by inertia." Keating rubbed a hand down his jaw, eyes never leaving the open folder. "I didn't know." "You didn't ask," she replied. "That's worse." There was no cruelty in her tone, only precision, the kind you used when disarming an explosive that had already killed people. "What do you want from me?" he asked finally. She reached into her side pouch and placed a second envelope on his desk, this one thinner but heavier. "Full access authorization," she said, "to personnel records, unit rotations, training logs, internal messaging systems, and counseling referrals, all restricted reporting forms, all climate survey responses, even the anonymous ones." Keating stared at the envelope like it might detonate. "And if I say no?" "You won't," he nodded. Of course he wouldn't. Riley pulled out a prepared checklist. "I want a formal review board convened in 72 hours. I want protected interviews conducted by external climate officers, not local staff. I want every previous sexual harassment claim from the past 2 years reopened and reevaluated, starting with those marked informal." "Understood." "I want chain of command notification protocols overhauled. I want mentorship assignments frozen. I want unit leadership recertified under updated behavioral oversight standards." Keating didn't even reach for a pen. He simply said, "Yes, Commander." "And one more thing," she added. He looked up. "I want those 3 transferred by end of week. Ruiz, Bray, Dorr. I don't care where they go, but they don't stay here. If they're not dishonorably discharged by the court-martialed board, then let them rot in a facility that knows exactly what they did." He swallowed hard. "Done." Riley turned to leave, but she paused at the door and looked back. "Colonel." "Yes?" "If your officers didn't know about this, that's on them. But if they did and said nothing, I'll find them next." Keating nodded slowly. "I believe you." Then she walked out, not with swagger, not with drama, just quiet finality. Outside, the training yard buzzed with the beginnings of the morning routine. PT lines forming, equipment carts rumbling, cadence calls drifting from nearby platoons. Riley walked past the chow hall. A few service members saw her and looked down. Others looked longer. A couple nodded. No one saluted, not because of disrespect, but because they understood now. This woman didn't need acknowledgement to assert authority. She was the authority. She wasn't here to inspire. She was here to audit. And this base had just been corrected. Now it's your turn. What would you have done in her position? Punish the attackers immediately, or expose the entire command structure that let them operate for so long? Do you think predators stop because they're scared, or only when they finally get exposed? And should the base commander be held accountable too? If this story made you feel something, hit that like button, subscribe, and make sure you've got the bell icon turned on so you never miss one of these uploads. Share this with someone who still thinks power means protection. And while you're at it, check out the video on screen. It's another story you won't forget. I'll see you tomorrow, same time.